Hi, this is part 3 of my review featuring Vaesen. If you haven't seen part 2 or part 1, please check out the link in the description below. It will take you to the playlist containing all of the parts of Vaesen. Now, this review is going to cover chapters for the game master's eyes only, so I'm going to review things quite loosely, quite ambiguously, in order not to spoil anything. First, we have information on the Vaesen, the supernatural beings that you are going to be confronting or interacting with during the course of the mysteries. This chapter begins by explaining the reasons why Vaesen exists. This is a very important part of the entire metaplot. It is crucial that the game master does not reveal the main reason as to why Vaesen exists. He should only give out some clues, some hints. Perhaps the player characters will figure that on their own, but if they get close to unraveling this ultimate truth about the supernatural happenings in the world of Vaesen, I think that by itself is going to generate a lot more questions too. So even if they get close to the truth, it's still going to generate many more mysteries. This chapter offers many Vaesen for you to use in all of your mysteries, all of your chronicles and campaigns. You also have tips and advice on how to use non-player characters, and you even have information on how to work with other supernatural beings from other places in the world. If you wanted to set your game of Vaesen in other parts of Europe, or perhaps in America, or in Asia, you can do that. So you will see in this chapter that the Vaesen and humans have coexisted since perhaps the beginning of mankind. So you have information on the nature of the Vaesen, how different religions look at Vaesen, and how folklore and philosophy rather approaches the issue of the Vaesen. You have the types of Vaesen divided by nature spirits, familiars, shapeshifters, spirits of the dead, and monsters. You have details on different places where the Vaesen exist or where they establish their huntings, and these serve as adventure seats, or perhaps as the start of an entire campaign. You also have information on the magical powers that the Vaesen can wield. You have enchantments, curses, and trollcraft. Some magical effects take long to be carried out or to be executed, but some others are quite instantaneous and can even be employed in, for example, battle or another immediate situation. You have information on each of these three types of spellcraft. Enchantments are magical effects that directly manifest upon a location or people living there, and sometimes the player characters as well. There are also curses. These are magical effects used to attack the player characters. It could happen at a distance without the player characters knowing where the creature is, or they could be used as a weapon in combat situations. You also have trollcraft. This is a form of magic usually practiced by trolls and fairies that involves bending time and space or altering reality in various ways. So there is a lot of variety as to the sort of attacks or manifestations that the Vaesen can use against the player characters and non-player characters as well. Enchantments are a bit more subtle, perhaps a bit more slow to notice, but they are more pervasive. They affect entire sites. They influence perhaps the weather, the atmosphere in a particular area or zone. And curses and trollcraft are a bit more direct and more localized or specific when compared to enchantments. And it is possible for player characters or other non-player characters that are not Vaesen to use these sort of magical effects, although this would require exceptional circumstances. Perhaps they obtain the capacity to use these effects through some sort of object or ritual. When it comes to enchantments, the Vaesen could perhaps create darkness, lead an animal invasion. Perhaps they can produce fog or cause plants to die. When it comes to curses, maybe they manage to enthrall someone. They produce night terrors. They cause sleep or self-loathing, or they twist the vision of someone. When it comes to trollcraft, maybe the Vaesen alters the age of someone. Maybe the Vaesen unleashes unrivaled passion. Maybe the Vaesen teleports someone somewhere else, or it manages to enlarge or shrink something or someone. You also have rules for the Vaesen. They do not have attributes or skills. Instead, they use 4 stats: might, body control, magic, and manipulation. These are going to be stats that are going to be determining how the Vaesen interact with the player characters. When it comes to non-player characters, this is one of the more simpler aspects of this role-playing game. Basically, the game master determines if a non-player character is hit by the Vaesen, or if the non-player character is going to affect the Vaesen in some way. In such manner, you save time, avoiding making rolls for the non-player characters, and you can also take immediate actions or reactions based on the context of the fight or any conflictive situation. So perhaps the player character manages to score a hit against a very dangerous Vaesen, and this creates a window of opportunity for a non-player character to attack that Vaesen. But what if the Vaesen gets the player character in some sort of sticky situation? Maybe the character falls down, prone, or gets entangled in something, and the non-player character tries to assist the player character, and he gets knocked aside by the Vaesen, suffering damage. We will talk a bit more about that later on. Now, back to the Vaesen stats. Might is used for attacking, heavy lifting, or other activities related to damage. You also have body control, used for evading attacks, chasing, fleeing, stealing things. You have magic, used for casting and resisting magical powers, and manipulation, used for deceiving or persuading the player characters or seeing through their lies. You also have a fear value, used when the player characters see the creature for the first time, as indicated in part 2 when it comes to fear effects. You have great tips and advice on how to roleplay the Vaesen. They usually aren't that murderous, unless it is part of their nature. They are more interested in causing mischief, mayhem, attacking from the shadows, so it's not uncommon for a Vaesen to appear several times during the mystery, just hitting and running, while the characters try to realize or investigate what is going on with the Vaesen, what is that Vaesen searching for or looking for, and how can they defeat it. The Vaesen can be banished, they could be bound, killed, or perhaps lulled to sleep by performing specific rituals. And finding out the exact weakness of a Vaesen is going to be quite challenging, because people's stories about how to banish Vaesen are, in most cases, only partially accurate. So you need to fill in the gaps, you need to put the pieces together of this puzzle in order to come up with a way on how to defeat or thwart or find some sort of common ground or negotiation with the Vaesen. You can inflict some physical damage in specific situations, but most of the time it is all solved through mind power, through using your intelligence to understand the Vaesen, how to get rid of the Vaesen or achieve some sort of harmony with it. You have information of items of power, magical items and specific powers that can affect the Vaesen. So you're going to find objects or create objects that deal direct damage to the Vaesen. Some other objects could give you advantages, bonuses during different checks against the Vaesen or related to the Vaesen, thwarting their activities or figuring out or deciphering their strange behaviors. But there's always a risk involved depending on your role. Things could go awry. Maybe the character teleports to some other place unintentionally while trying to activate some sort of magic item. Or maybe while trying to scry or see into something, the player character is visited by a Vaesen, or perhaps some object fails completely and the character takes direct damage, that is, suffers conditions. Now, when it comes to the Vaesen, they come in many different shapes, varieties, sizes. You have examples of conflicts, which also serve as adventure seeds or elements to integrate into a particular mystery. You have the characteristics of the Vaesen, magical powers, combat abilities, and basic attacks. You also have conditions that the Vaesen can go through as it takes damage. Perhaps the Vaesen becomes quite murderous, or changes shape, or uses some sort of resource based on the environment to attack the player characters, or at the very least hinder their efforts. They also have many magical powers. Maybe a Vaesen can control vegetation. Maybe a Vaesen can lure someone into his or her own doom. Maybe some other Vaesen are very secretive and stealthy, and they are rarely perceived or identified. Some other creatures could perhaps inflict some sort of delusion or illusion upon the minds of the player characters. Some others could curse the player characters. Some others could just use brute force to attack them. There are many ways in which the Vaesen can deal with the player characters. I don't want to spoil anything when it comes to the special effects and attacks. That's going to be the entire part of the mystery. And of course, each of these Vaesen has a secret and a way to defeat it. This also serves to spark many ideas on how to create specific Vaesen with particular weaknesses tied to the mysteries themselves. So you could use a single type of Vaesen for many different mysteries, and just by making a few adjustments or tweaks, that Vaesen could work quite differently in various situations, with different weaknesses, strengths, special attacks, etc. So you have many things, such as fairies, ghosts, giants. You also have mares, mermaids, night ravens, revenants. There is an excellent variety. There is a lot of color and uniqueness in the ways in which you can employ this Vaesen to serve as enemies or perhaps as allies to the player characters. Just like humans, Vaesen are capable of both great good and great evil. Now, when it comes to non-player characters, you have a list of sample people with their stats, their attributes, their skills. You have soldiers, doctors, students, farmers, hunters, merchants, all ready to be used as player characters' allies or as enemies. That's when you are going to be making rolls based on their attributes and their skills. But when it comes to non-player characters interacting with other non-player characters, or trying to modify, affect, or interact with something of the environment or something related to the story, the game master is free to determine if the non-player character achieves whatever he or she is trying to do automatically. It could be a success or a failure, and this works great because in this way non-player characters work as plot devices to further push the story forward. You even have a table to determine different traits for non-player characters. Maybe a non-player character is considerate, or eccentric, or playful, or bitter, or perhaps it is a few of those things as well. You can roll as many times as you want in this table, although it is advised that you only roll twice. Otherwise, the personality of the non-player character is going to feel all over the place. Unless you want to play as a non-player character with a split personality, I guess you could do that as well. You also have information on animals with their stats, so animals could serve as pets or as antagonists. Maybe the player characters need to hunt, for example. You also have information, like I told you at the beginning of this review, on the Vaesen of the world. You can decide the origin, choose templates or models to represent a specific Vaesen. So if you want some sort of creature from any other place in the world, if you're setting your campaign not in Scandinavia, like I said, perhaps in Japan or France, any place in the world, you could do that. You would only need to do a bit more research because this core rulebook contains everything to roleplay in Scandinavia during the 19th century, but depending on the place, things could be completely different context-wise. Although you do have some examples on different Vaesen, different supernatural creatures that you could find in different places of the world. So for example, if you are setting your campaign in Eastern Europe, you could have the Baba Yaga or the Vanik. Or perhaps you are setting things in the Middle East, it could be an Ifrit or a Jinn. Or if it's South America, it could be a Madre Monte or El Culebrón. The chapter that follows features the mystery. This is how to create and game master mysteries in Vaesen. The first part of the text focuses on the components of the mystery and explains how to lay the groundwork by choosing one or more Vaesen and coming up with conflicts that have triggered the events at the center of the story. The second part is about shaping the mystery into a text that you can use during play. It describes the phases that make up every mystery, which are always played in the same order. The components of the mystery are basically the Vaesen. You name your Vaesen, you see how that Vaesen features into the conflict or is introduced in the story of the mystery. They even give you examples, they talk about game balance and how to handle conflicts. You also have example of primary conflicts, secondary conflicts, and you also have misdeeds, that is, whatever that the Vaesen is causing is affecting someone or someplace in a negative way. This could be related to the actions of humans as well, of course. You also have information on the location, the atmosphere, clues. They give you example on how to create flavored text to give some very atmospheric and colorful descriptions of the places that the characters are visiting, while keeping that sense of dread and the unknown. You also have information on clues, central clues, peripheral clues, how to spread them out, how to seed them so that the player characters can unravel them or decipher them or just find them as they keep on investigating the mystery at hand. You have examples of clues. You also have ideas on how to use props to heighten the sense of immersion. You also have the concept of countdown to catastrophe. This is the way that conflicts and elements within the mystery escalate. It's as if the dangerous and unknown elements of the mystery get closer and closer to the player characters. At first, the mystery seems quite distant. Perhaps the group finds out about some terrible thing that happened to someone, to a stranger, and as they look further into things, perhaps now the danger occurs to someone that they know, someone close to them, and later on, they are the ones being hunted down or affected by the source of the threat. You have details on the structure of the mystery, following a step-by-step sequence, with the prologue, the invitation, that is how the mystery is introduced, preparations that the characters take before taking on the mystery to get an advantage. You also have details on the journey itself, what happens as the characters are traveling along to the destination where something really bad or just peculiar happened. You also have information on the arrival, the places that they are investigating or that they will be investigating, the confrontation with the Vaesen or any other party involved, and the aftermath. So you have these templates with extensive details, information, and examples. You also have diagrams, flowcharts to better structure the different confrontations, investigations, and the journeys through the different places and locations. You also have many tables to determine the invitation to the mystery, who is the quest giver. So for example, the investigation could be a letter by postal rider. The quest giver could be an eccentric scientist. And what is the misdeed? Perhaps there is crop failure, or vandalism, or sabotage, disease, or madness. You also have a table to determine the Vaesen responsible for this. Maybe the potentially guilty Vaesen is a sea serpent, or perhaps a troll, or a werewolf. You also have a table to determine the main conflict. Maybe the Vaesen has lost its home. Maybe the Vaesen is bound by magic to the place. You also have a table to determine the state of mind of the Vaesen. Maybe it is hateful or murderous. Or perhaps it's just protective or territorial. You also have a local sub-conflict table. Maybe the cause of the tension is because of a shortage of pastures, or maybe because of financial debt. You also have local sub-conflicts, such as unrequited love or unjust enrichment. So all of these elements can be mixed and matched together to come up with a complex mystery. You have a table to determine the meetings. Perhaps in their investigations, the characters encounter servants, village idiots, county sheriffs, or a famous hermit. You also have information on non-player character names. You can determine these different male names, female names, and last names randomly for non-player characters or for player characters as well. There's also a table to determine interesting locations in the mysteries. Maybe something happens in the smithy, or in a farm, or at the cemetery. All of these different tables makes Vaesen a very solo or co-op friendly experience. If you like to play solo role-playing games with Game Master emulators, these tables are going to be very handy. But you could also use them to improvise an entire mystery. If you do not like to pre-write your adventures, you can use these tables to build a mystery on the fly. You have information on the campaign and Game Master techniques to handle things smoothly. You have tips and advice on how to listen to the player characters to see how their background integrates with the mystery and to further flesh out that throughout the course of an adventure or a chronicle or campaign. You also have information on how to introduce and handle puzzles and riddles, how to roleplay as non-player characters and use them for mechanical effects. You also have elements to create a fairy tale feel in your mystery. For example, handling destinies, curses, foretellings, the moral of the story, once upon a time sort of situations. There are also details on how the dark secrets of the player characters come into play with the mystery, how to introduce twists, how to handle maps, dreams and supernatural experiences, false leads. And then we have a complete introductory scenario that is actually very much tied to the background of the society. I have yet to review the campaign book. I will be reviewing it in a future video, but in the meantime I can tell you that this adventure connects to a larger campaign. So it's going to be very interesting how that is going to work out. I'm going to tell you about this scenario, this adventure, in a very loose way, like I told you, to avoid spoilers. But I can tell you that many situations, all of the characters' potential abilities will come into play in this scenario. You have a mystery, a call or request for aid, or a sort of consultation on the part of the player characters. You have a mysterious sight. You roleplay through the entire thing, but you do have tips on shortening the scenario if you want to play this, let's say, as a very quick one-shot, or to play it at a convention. You could do that with the tips included here. But I highly recommend that you play the entire thing because it is very atmospheric, it's very flavorful, with the non-player character requesting their aid. And this is actually a very dangerous scenario. If the player characters are not smart, if they approach this carelessly, you will get a total party kill, make no mistake. But I think that's also part of the charm of the scenario. If the characters get immediately killed, maybe they could serve as the horrible background. All of their player characters die, so now they have to create new ones. Perhaps they are family members or friends of the ones that died, and they need to find out what happened to them. They need to avenge them in some way. So now you create these new members of the society. So this is a horror scenario that is perfect. Even if it results in a total party kill, that loss, that defeat, will only add flavor and enhance the horror aspect of the scenario. This is a somewhat long scenario. Unless you shorten it, it's going to take you about between 2 to 3 sessions to complete it. And the player characters will have to talk with non-player characters. They will have to gather clues. If they analyze things carefully, they will realize that some things are not as they seem initially, and the source of the threat will only be thwarted if they determine exactly what happened. There are many different ways to end this adventure, that is, you are not forced into a singular outcome. The mystery and the threat can reach a satisfying resolution in several ways, but at the same time, things could go wrong in a variety of ways as well. By the end of this scenario, the player characters will not only learn a lot about the Vaesen, but also about the darkness within the human heart. At the end of the book, you have background tables. These are excellent to randomly generate everything about your character during the character creation process. So you can determine the upbringing of your character. Maybe your character was a gang member, or a servant, or belonged to some sort of underground group. And this is tied to attributes and skills, so your attributes and skills are directly connected to the past of your character. Or maybe your character was a party animal, or was in the corridors of power. Perhaps you were a rebel, or you were quite spoiled. You also have a table to determine the profession of the character with the resources. You have life event tables. Maybe your character has a rival, maybe you suffered an accident. These are also things that are going to modify your skills and your equipment. Maybe your character comes from faraway lands, or maybe your character is going through some sort of grief process. These tables are great to come up with some original concepts based on the results, to use them as inspiration. And if you wanted to, of course, you could also use them to create interesting non-player characters as well, to add a bit more complexity to them. So what do I think of Vaesen, the role-playing game of Nordic horror? This is such a beautiful horror game. There are so many good things to say about it. I think that it's a great introduction to horror role-playing games, especially those that feature detective work quite prominently. The character creation process is great, with a system of random determination concerning the background of the player characters, but you also have the standard point buy sort of, or point distribution sort of system. The skills make sense, the talents, the way that conflict is handled is quite fast, logical, and lethal for the horror experience that it is trying to represent. All of the rules, the special effects, how to heal injuries, how to handle gear and equipment, it all feels like a unified system of sorts. There are no complicated subsystems. It all makes sense. You also have a complete campaign setting, and I think there is a lesson to be learned, or educational value, when it comes to the setting of Vaesen. It is not good to dwell on extremes. You can see that the problems in Vaesen lie in people that either completely abandon nature and go into the cities, or those that completely reject the technological advantages of science as they are seen in cities and go completely into the countryside to live as if they are still in the Middle Ages. You need to reach a sort of compromise, a sort of perfect balance of the urban and the rural in the same place. That's my take on Vaesen. Maybe you can gain some further insights from the setting of Vaesen and the extensive information on the Vaesen, on the supernatural creatures that you can find in 19th century Scandinavia, as well as information on how to handle Vaesen or supernatural creatures in other places of the world. It's going to give you material for many years to come, and the chapter covering mystery and the complete scenario is going to get you started immediately. You will become a master of Vaesen chronicles and campaigns thanks to the clear explanations and methodology on how to run mysteries and adventures. So I give this game my highest recommendation. If you are looking for horror adventures where you actually need to solve the mystery in order to defeat the supernatural threat, look no further. This is not a B-horror movie type of experience. This is more similar to, or closer to, Hammer horror films, where the supernatural foe can only be defeated after its weaknesses are exposed. But if I were to point out my favorite aspect of this role-playing game, it is the handling of the society. How Castle Gillencruz itself is a source of shelter but also of threats, mystery and danger. As you start to build a community of different non-player characters that start to revive or resurrect this society that is the only organism capable of handling the Vaesen, any mystery and campaign that you are developing is going to take a life of its own. Thank you for watching this review. If you have any comments or questions, please let me know. And thank you so much to those that have been supporting the channel by sending Drive-Thru RPG gift certificates. If anyone else wants to further support the channel, the information how to do that will be in the description below. Once again, thank you, and see you later.